If you've read your program, like the good scholars that you are, I'm not supposed to be the moderator of this panel. My really good friend, Rufus, was supposed to be the moderator of this panel, and Rufus is last minute unavailable. So I'm filling in. And did we get enough seats for everyone officially? That's okay. I'm okay, sir. So I am going to do my best, but really this conversation is pivoting a little bit like we do in innovation, because really this is going to be a conversation amongst my friends. When I gave Rufus the provocation at the end of the year to build a think tank around the question of civic practice, the university, and arts and humanities, the thing that I was wrestling with as someone who was trying to kind of shepherd this thing through was what is the relationship of the inherent nature of arts and activism with the ways in which we run our systems. Because there's a lot of feelings that we as artists have about the ways that the world should run, and yet we seem, for a myriad of reasons, to not have the power to change the world towards our beliefs. And so I was asking myself, what does it mean to profess to believe in a certain type of civic practice, but to not have the agency to participate in civic action in the way that we might otherwise be able to? So I would love to go down the row and let this enormously incredible panel introduce themselves. Be brief, because this is all about you. I would love to hear who you are, what your role is in. Yeah, who are you? Who are you? But also, like, why this panel? Why is this exciting to you? Why did you say yes today? So we'll start here.
So we're totally flying by the seat of our pants, you guys, because she's changed all the questions. But this one I know the answer to. So I'm Liz Shapiro. I'm the Director of Arts, Preservation, and Museums with the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. It's a long title. And this panel is really interesting to me because I think we spend a lot of time defending why the arts are so important and like critical to civic structures. And so we want to shed light on that, and we really want the people in the room who have power, and those of us who feel like they don't have power often actually have power, to begin to like drink the Kool-Aid and get the message out there.
I'm Calida Jones, and I am the founder of Cnjassociates and the co-founder of Creative Evolutions, and I'm also an entrepreneur in residence at Yale Ventures. And this panel is, well, it's exciting for me because it's another opening, right? Like it's another opportunity to talk about the fact that we're not just artists, we're also civic workers, whether we want to recognize that or not. And it's also an opportunity to interrogate all of the work that we do. And newsflash, that whole nonprofit thing, it's a tax status. And I'm really excited about building business models and helping people to build organizations that thrive and make money, where artists can keep the money for the work that they do.
Hi, I'm Jason Mancini, Executive Director of Connecticut Humanities, co-founder of Agama Educational Initiative, and Vice Chair of the America 250 Connecticut Commission. It's great to be here with everybody. I'm really curious, and I love to collaborate, so I'm excited to hear what we all sort of get into today, and we'll enjoy Francis's curveballs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hope Chavez. I'm the Executive Director at the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. I'm also an entrepreneur in residence, and the Arts Council was really lucky this year to work with the Cultural Innovation Lab at Yale, the first Arts Accelerator cohort that Francis led. So coming to this conversation, I've never known my own creative leadership or practice without activism, so they are just inextricably tied and might be why Francis wanted me to talk about it. But I also firmly believe that our democracy relies on us actually being able to facilitate creative practice. And I also think that our creative practice allows us to imagine the world we desperately need to create. So.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arthur Thomas. I am the CEO and founder of Integrity Solutions Group. And essentially, that's a fancy way of saying people pay me for my brain and my network. More importantly to me, though, I am a minister, which means that the human being is incredibly important to me. And so a lot of the work that I do is at the intersection of faith, venture, philanthropy, as an intervention for economic development and community flourishing. And then particularly, I like the structures of ecosystems as a strategy to create more vitality and sort of human flourishing.
So, yeah, these are the people that I get to work with every day, and you can hear how they have their fingers in everything, right? And these are the leaders. My goal for you today is to convince you that these are the people who are pushing for different things to happen, pushing for a better world in the state of Connecticut specifically. So Rufus gave us this really beautiful outline of all the questions that we should ask and like an order, and then he like put everyone's names. And then I had a meeting with him briefly before this, and Arthur was like, you should start with the question, who gets to call themselves a creator? And so Arthur, I feel like you have thoughts about this. And I also, my friend, want you to connect it to civic practice.
She moved the goalpost on me. So that kind of comes from a fundamental belief that we were made by a creator, and everybody has a creative capacity inside of them. That is my fundamental belief. So most of the time when you're solving problems, that is an expression of a creative act, right? Entrepreneurship is a creative act. So the artist is one way of framing, but basically everybody are creatives. Everybody's creatives. So if that's the case, if you have a unique synthesis of gifts and talents and things that you can offer the world, you have a purpose, then how do we put an infrastructure around cultivating that ability, right? To develop something that will contribute to the world. One way to package that is through a business. One is through a nonprofit. But basically, it means that you are important enough for the governments, for the leaders to make an investment in your capacity to be, your capacity to create, and to contribute to society. So if that's the case, then how do we build those economic architectures, the civic infrastructures to perpetuate your ability to create? Because to me, everybody is a creator. And so I don't think that we should silo creatives to artists, right? I think that we should look at everybody as someone who has the potential and possibility to change the world, but also teach them how to build sustainable practices to keep that impact going in perpetuity.
So I want to kick over to Liz, because you for a long time, or for many months this year, was very grumpy about one of the slogans that the state was using for manufacturing. Do you remember this?
I do.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that slogan? Can you also tell me what you were grumpy about and why you think it matters to this conversation? Or read my mind about why I think it matters?
Raise your hand if you work for the state of Connecticut. Thanks, Francis. Grumpy. Okay, I was a little grumpy, but I wasn't mad. I was just grumpy, which is the thing, right? And there's a difference. And so I think the slogan you're talking about is "Made in Connecticut." Is that the slogan you're talking about?
It was the one when manufacturers were being called creatives, or
so there's a great slide deck that is now, I think it's probably 2 years old, and when it's to talk about manufacturing in Connecticut, which is amazing, by the way, and by the way also, you can't have manufacturing without creative thinkers. So, So in this slide, one of the things it said was that come and work in manufacturing because it is the top creative industry. And the Made in Connecticut slogan kind of went with that. And I had not been, no one had shown me the slide deck, but now that would never happen today. And I'm going to actually go on record saying that does not happen anymore. But I looked at the slide deck and I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I don't want to say it out loud. You know what I was thinking? Like, what how are you saying this? And how did you decide you were going to say that when literally your colleague practically in the next office runs the Office of the Arts? Like, how could you do that? And so first I took it personally, and then I'm like a grown-up. I'm like, okay, no, you're nice. But here's the thing. When it is convenient for people to become creatives and label themselves as creatives, they do. But when that is a drawback, because like we don't really fund creatives, we don't fund the arts, then we're not creatives, we are manufacturing. And so I think the good thing about this is I think we're missing this giant opportunity, and I think it's really exciting, right? Because the giant opportunity is to mesh everybody so that, going on exactly what Arthur said, we are all thinking about everyone in a room as part of a creative ecosystem first. Because let's face it, we're at the Yale Summit for ... innovation. And you're not going to tell me that the people who are in here presenting that you're talking to, that one of them is not a creative. That would just be like you're living in your own dream world, if that's what you think. Every single person here is creative. Otherwise, we would have no innovation. So that's why I was grumpy. But I'm less grumpy now because now I get a microphone and I get to say it.
Putting people's jobs on the line since 2026.
I gave her money.
Let me also acknowledge, and we're going to spend a lot of the next panel acknowledging what the audacity of what Liz has allowed to happen, because we're in this room because of Liz. I don't want to gush about that because I'll just get off on a soapbox. But Calida, you and I have spent what feels like decades at this point talking about the relationship between institutions, professed beliefs, and outcomes. And I think this is why you're like business models, right? Nonprofit is a tax status. So talk to me a little bit about the tension there, because I think that that trend transcends the arts.
It does. That's true. I mean, I will talk about it from the lens of our state because I've lived here now longer than where I'm from, which is DC area, PG County, represent. But back to Connecticut. So we are a state of contradictions, y'all. We got all these wealthy people who are super philanthropic, have a lot of resources, and then there's all this disinvestment that has happened in communities primarily of color and indigenous. And so when I think about nonprofit, that's kind of been a thing that's been on my mind, mainly because I've been working with a bunch of nonprofits across the nation where their money is funny and the math is never mathing. And I'm like, we need to figure this out because this is not sustainable. Like, we weren't built to live this way. And I think the sooner that we can come out of that scarcity mindset around money, around funding, around talking to investors, around proudly standing up for the mission you say you have, for the vision and values you say you are aligned with. If you're not backing those words up that are on your website or what you say to people when you're here, if you're not backing it up with the data and the numbers and the money, then the math, in fact, is not mathing. And we have to do a better job of educating ourselves because a lot of us, this is going to be very uncomfortable for you to hear, but not for me to say, a lot of us are very uncomfortable with being told, I don't think you understand how business works and how budgets work and how profits and losses work and how intellectual property works. But then once you meet people who do know the information and you don't seek them out and you don't learn it, that's on you 100%. That does not fall on the organization. That does not fall on your friends and on your therapist. No. In fact, it's a self lesson and it's uncomfortable, y'all. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's been perfect for me. This lifestyle, I was just talking to several people in here. It sometimes I feel like our industry is, it's grunge work. Like, it doesn't always feel beautiful and loving and, I'm just falling into a bed of flowers. No, actually, I feel like I'm sitting on nails every day. But I do know that the more information that I'm armed with, which comes in this room because of you, sorry, not today, it's going to change. It's going to change our state. It's going to change the East Coast. But we have to be willing to divorce our egos and our pride and really learn about the business and the business case for not just arts, but also for nonprofits. We should be proud to say that we're a nonprofit that is also making money. We are a nonprofit that's also funding other projects that are happening in the communities that we say we care about. That care has got to come with some reciprocity. It's very important. And I think we get caught up a lot of times in the minutia, and we need to focus on how do we spread this out? How do we break some of the power off so that other people have power? That's how I live my life. And people that know me in this room know that. If you're hungry and I'm going into a room where there's food, but everybody else can't get in, you're coming into that room with me. This is my +1. And if we all did that, like imagine if we all talked to an investor and we said, hey, Francis, come meet this investor. Francis runs Midnight Oil Innovations, and this is what, imagine if we all did that for each other. This room would look so different. It would look so different. And it comes from kindness, and it comes from humility, and it comes from learning from that book that you're going to hear about in the next session. See what I did there, how I tied that in?
Preach. Absolutely. Yeah, give it up for Calida. I also just wanted to say, Calida was our keynote speaker for year 2. And the reason that I had asked Calida to be a speaker at that point, one was because Creative Evolutions was one of the first sponsors to sponsor us, right? And I was like, you are giving us your time, your talents, your resources, your connections. You were working with us.
But Francis, we didn't have no money. That's the thing.
I know.
We didn't have.
Y'all, but someone dug up a penny somewhere because our artists got paid that year, right? And that was y'all. And so, but I just remember Calida standing up in front of, this group essentially and saying, it's on you if you don't get anything out of this event, right? Like we're up here like throwing ourselves trying to make the space for the people to come together. And if you can't, if you can't make the math work, I don't know, maybe you need to learn how math works, right?
Or maybe step aside. Like that's okay too. Actually, I'm going to say that too.
Or step aside.
Or step aside. Like if it's not working for you, like if you have a thing, you have this idea, you're trying to scale it, you're trying to get pre-seeding, and people are saying, no, we're not interested, or that's not really jiving with me. It's okay to put it down. Like you don't have to force it on someone, because maybe that's just not the part of your purpose that needs to be activated now. Mm-hmm. And maybe there are still pieces of you need to learn before that's going to take shape, before the vision becomes clear.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jason, I'm going to like hopscotch over you for just a second because I want to ask Hope quick. No. I'm setting you up for the big question. I know. Jason's like, I don't know what you're going to ask me. Hope, you're one of the most vocal social justice activated leaders in our community, right? You like in this time of consolidation and sort of a pushing away of DEI, you're still doing this at the university. You incorporate those practices in your own organization. Like, talk to me about how you navigate the waters that you are forced to navigate, and having that be a core part of your value system.
So I teach anti-racism practices for theater managers at the Yale School of Drama, and I've only done it for 2 years. I'm coming into my 3rd year, and I remember wondering how people were going to react to me in some of the fancy places that I was now in, when I would be like in a Yale space, and somehow it would be identified through a name tag or something else that I was faculty, and so what did I teach? And I know people expected me to say a lot of other things than anti-racism practices for theater managers, and I really wondered how they would react. But no one has ever scoffed at it, but I say that to say that sometimes the vulnerability is the actual work itself. Sometimes just saying that you're doing the thing is actually the way that you continue to iterate towards change, because no one was actually going to scoff in my face in those spaces and be like, oh, why? In fact, either they would lean away and be like, oh, or they would lean in and go, what's that like? What does that mean? What do you teach? How does that work? That's a more institutionalized example. I wouldn't call that activism, because I think activism is about being at the roots. So for me, and it is a practice, I don't know, I don't think it's worth celebrating, other than I am happy to encourage others to continue to do it if that is helpful. But I I have never been able to be in a position of leadership without feeling like I am also deeply connected to the roots. Otherwise, I can't actually show up authentically in any kind of civic engagement. I actually can't go to a donor meeting if I don't feel like I have had my hands in the soil of the ecosystem I'm trying to serve, because otherwise, for me, it feels so performative. And I'm aware of it, and I'm actually not good at it for me. And so that looks like building relationships with people who are doing housing activism. It looks like being in early stage conversations with the New Haven Immigrants Coalition. It looks like being on the board of the Pride Center. It looks like all of these other ways where I am sitting in rooms where my job is actually to put out chairs or to bring bagels or to drive someone safely to a safe house. And that's not to celebrate any of that work. It's actually to say that if I remember marshaling a rally and someone looked at me and was like, Hope? I was like, yeah, actually, that's how it works. That's how it works for me to be able to understand what's happening in reality and mean it and do it and serve my time in supporting folks. That was maybe not the right phrase, but to do my work with all of you. So I think that practice probably comes from being in spaces before I was in leadership positions, in rooms where people would say, so how do we figure out how to connect our workshop with what's happening over in the climate activism space? Or how do we get more young people to come to our show? Or why don't we have more Black and brown folks who are getting commissions from our new work pipeline? Why don't we know who they are? And I would just be like, well, where are you outside of the walls of this institution? You're not in any of those rooms. You're not talking to any of those people. So I just lovingly encourage all of you to find that authentic space for you. What is the thing that you actually care about? Who are the people that you're actually interested in serving outside of the work that you do with your titles and your pedigrees and your institutions behind you? Because that, for me, is how I actually think about the relationship between what I'm trying to do from a systems level as an arts service organization and the change I want to see in the world. And the last thing I'll say about that is that when I think about arts for art's sake, it's really actually uninspiring to me. I think art is always in relationship to something else. So the Arts Council, for example, does advocacy alerts. And a lot of people want us to do that only when we're talking about arts funding or an arts policy bill. And I think that's actually really shallow. I think that's only half the battle. We don't look important or necessary to our legislators and our elected officials unless we are actually aware of all the other decisions they have to make about housing and basic needs and education and all the other, they have so many things on their plate, and we're coming to them and just talking about grants for artists, which is really important, but we're being a little myopic when we don't understand what they're also facing and the choices and costs they're weighing constantly. So we now do solidarity alerts and advocacy alerts, where we don't pretend to be expert on things that are not arts. However, we have real relationships and partners in spaces of climate and housing and immigration. And we know that impacts our constituency too. We know we have people who are artists who would identify with these issues. And so we now do a little bit of both hand. And hopefully long term, we'll see that helps folks take us a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well said. I know, these are the leaders in the state of Connecticut. They're great. And it connects back to what Arthur was saying, which is inviting everyone to see themselves as a creator, right? And maybe by doing that, we invite ourselves as artists or creators to see ourselves in all other ways too, right? So not to put you on the spot, but Jason, you're the sort of you're one of the faces of the humanities, but you hold a very important position in the state of Connecticut as the Office of the Humanities. In this time, and not just in the arts, but in this time, why humanities? Why not, let's quit our jobs, let's all go join our tech brothers and sisters over in the other tracks, which we love, we do. Why not just go work? Why drop the books and not just go work for Wall Street? Why humanities?
You have a small history lesson. So, March of 2020.
Microphone, please.
Closer. Sorry. March of 2020, we saw COVID come on, and it devastated all of us, closed everything, and suddenly we were all disconnected from one another. January 6th of 2021, we saw a riot at the Capitol, and suddenly everybody was interested in civics and comparisons with history and why is this happening. And I think in this moment, humanities gives us those lessons. They bring us back to the past, but also why it matters now. During that time, so the other thing I should probably say publicly is I am the yang to Liz's yin. Sort of publicly and privately. Take that the right way. Public-private partnership. So during that time, Liz and I worked very closely together to ensure that the organizations in our community, we'd actually been thinking a lot about what is the cultural ecosystem in Connecticut? What does it look like? Who's composing it? And thinking, to Arthur's earlier point, about the health of the ecosystem and what is required. And so we didn't know, Liz and I started our jobs around the same time, about 8 years ago. And we sort of had this open question about, who's in our ecosystem? What does it look like? And we really didn't have a clear idea. We started getting a sense of our grantees and who we're partnering with. But the moment of the pandemic opened a door for us to sort of really think about funding advocacy, and Connecticut Humanities at that time was awarded $31 million by the state. And it provided an opportunity for Liz and us, Liz's Office of the Arts and my Connecticut Humanities to really think broadly about the functioning and health of our cultural ecosystem. And so we ended up awarding grants, operating support grants to over 700 cultural organizations in the state, but it also gave us the opportunity to sort of listen and learn and hear and understand what the needs are in the sector, and really sort of being that convener and thinker and collaborator and partner to understand and really sort of digest the moment we were all sort of struggling with, both in terms of the devastating impact of a pandemic that's isolating us in our homes and from our families and our communities, separating us in ways that we can't even imagine in terms of how we serve, who we serve, why we serve. And then really sort of thinking about how do we catalyze that into something more, so that it's not just putting dollars into the ecosystem without any sense of how can we possibly work better together, and how do we sort of collectively advocate for the work of arts and humanities and culture together in our communities, on our main streets, in our cultural districts, in the different ways that matters to all of us. And so, humanities is struggling to sort of ask hard questions in these moments, and we want to convene, we want to bring people together and challenge the status quo. And I think that's where the value of arts and humanities together matters. I mean, and I'll just sort of say, for those of you who are not aware, we were doged last April, and we are still sort of living in that reality in a very challenging way. So the idea that government funding for arts and humanities is challenged and restricted or terminated, as the case is with many people and organizations, this is the opportunity to really ideate and innovate around what does that look like, what do we need, what do we want to see better, different, in the ways that we can connect and collaborate for all of us.
Can I just go to that? Just as a coda, if in case you don't know, arts and humanities were always the same, except that in 1966 the federal government separated them, and so in creating the National Humanities, what is it? NEA and NEH, sorry, letters. And so one of the things that Jason and I talked about even before we got to the positions that we have now is like, why? This isn't working. And by the way, legislators and people who vote see us as the same thing. So what are we doing? And so that, like, maybe that's the earliest innovation, was just saying, like, this is just a hard no. Because if arts and humanities weren't working together to have these conversations, then however are we going to work with, like, manufacturing and tech and like, that will never happen. We can't even talk to, like, our brother and sister. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And just strangely, in Connecticut, it seems that this is sort of new. It doesn't happen in other states.
Weird.
It's weird. All right, we have time for one question, but here's the thing. Is that I am going to be so angry if I give this opportunity to someone and they don't ask the most provocative question that they can think of. So don't you raise your hand if you can't think of a good question, and don't go on and on about yourself. So who has a question? Everyone's scared. You are brave.
I am nervous. Hello, I am a first-year MBA student at the Yale School of Management. I love the arts, and I am so curious, as leaders of the community, and in this conversation about culture and responsiveness, is there a responsibility to use consumer behavior in the purchase of art as a